Hello and welcome to the channel, and I'm here for another throwback list video for you guys. Now, for this list, I'll be going over, in my opinion, some of the best metal albums of the year 2005. Now, I do think that 2005 has been a pretty solid year for metal, and I usually do add rock to these lists as well. Typically, I go over some of the best rock and metal albums whenever I talk about a certain year for music, but unfortunately, there weren't really any rock albums of the year 05 that really, I guess, did it for me, I guess you could say. So this list will just be exclusive to metal, and this list will not be in any particular order, and also let me know what your favorite metal albums were of the year 2005. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started, and I think we'll start off with the band As I Lay Dying. Of course, an essential metalcore band for sure. Probably one of the first few bands that come to mind when people think of metalcore. Obviously, an iconic metalcore band and one of the legends in the genre for sure. And the album that As I Lay Dying released in 2005 is their album Shadows Are Security, which is often considered one of their best. I might say it's one of their best, but not their absolute best. I think that their best album is An Ocean Between Us, but Shadows Are Security, it's a pretty good album, I'd say. Now, my main issue with this album is really just mainly the production and just mainly the variation of the album, I guess. There's not really a whole lot to return to from this album. I feel like a lot of these songs you could say are rather samey, but the album isn't bad though by any means for sure. So yeah, I mean, it just has As I Lay Dying doing their thing. It's just good old metalcore, of course. I mean, that's just what you get on this album. You just get good old metalcore, of course, of the early 2000s. But I mean, you do got some really good songs on the album though, like Meaning and Tragedy, Confined, The Darkest Nights, which is one of their most popular tracks. Through Struggle is a very good song as well. But yeah, you do get a lot of really good stuff on this album. Some of the best guitar performances and all that good stuff. Now, Tim Lambisis's growls, his vocals on this album. He's definitely done better than this. I think throughout time he gets better with each album vocally, but I think he does a pretty good job on this album. So, Shadows Are Security by As I Lay Dying. So the next album I want to talk about is by the band Demon Hunter. Definitely a band that means a lot to me. One of my first metalcore bands and just one of my first metal bands in general. And the album that Demon Hunter released in 2005 is their album The Triptych, which is another album, again, that is often considered one of their best. And I definitely agree with that. This is maybe my favorite Demon Hunter album, to be honest. If it's not my favorite, then it's definitely within the top 3 for me, for sure. But yeah, there's just absolutely no going wrong with this album. I mean, almost all the songs on this album are great. I mean, if I had to pick a least favorite on the album, I'd maybe go with The Science of Lies, but that's not saying much because even that song is not bad. But of course, this album has some of Demon Hunter's best songs. I think it has some of their best ballads as well. Very emotion-driven ballads on this album that I really do like a lot. I mean, of course, Deteriorate is one of my favorite Demon Hunter songs, and in my opinion, one of their best ballads. The Tide Began to Rise, the closing track, is also a ballad, and I really like this one too. That song is also very emotion-driven. But yeah, of course, the heavy stuff on this album you can't go wrong with as well, like Not I and Undying. Now, you do get a cover for Prong, Snap Your Fingers, Snap Your Neck. Now, Prong, they're a band that I might look into sometime. I'm not really too familiar with them. But yeah, and then you got the song 1000 Apologies, which is more radio rock driven, more mainstream. But I think that's a really great song as well. Probably another one of their best songs as well. But yeah, absolutely can't go wrong with this album. Maybe one of my favorite metalcore albums of all time. Now, I know that there's debates on there about whether or not Demon Hunter's a metalcore band or whatever, but come on. I mean, a lot of their stuff is very much metalcore. So, The Triptych by Demon Hunter. So the next album that I'm going to talk about is by Trivium, another band that I guess is debatable on whether or not they're metalcore or not, but you could say that they're metalcore for sure. And of course, the album that Trivium released in 2005 is their album Ascendancy. Of course, this album is still very early on in their career, and I do think that this is one of their best albums. And I know the consensus of Trivium fans would probably say the same thing. I mean, when it comes to their metalcore sound, I think this is kind of where it's at, I think. Because I know after this, they kind of moved on to a more thrash direction with The Crusade and Shogun. And Shogun is actually my favorite Trivium album. But this album, I do think, is one of their best, of course. I mean, probably their heaviest album too, I would say. I mean, you got songs like Rain, the title track, like Light to the Flies, and you also got The Deceived, which I think is kind of an underrated song from these guys. But yeah, Ascendancy, definitely a great album by Trivium. So the next album I want to talk about is by the band Overkill. Overkill, I think, is one of the best thrash metal bands of all time. I've heard some people say that, they deserve to be a part of the Big Four instead of maybe Slayer or Anthrax or something, and if that were to ever happen, I wouldn't have a problem with that personally, because I do think Overkill is a very good band, for sure. And of course, the album that Overkill released in 2005 is their album Relix, or Relix 4, however you want to say it, but yeah, this is definitely a really good album. I don't think it's one of their best by any means, but still a very strong album. I mean, production-wise, instrumental-wise, I mean, the album just sounds really good overall. Now, I know some people complain that Overkill is kind of a samey band, and I can understand where people are coming from with that, and I think a lot of people say that that's the case with most thrash metal anyways, but yeah, Relix 4, I think it's a good album, but yeah, not one of their best, of course, but still a very strong album. I especially really like the first two songs on the album, Within Your Eyes and Love, especially the song Within Your Eyes, which is maybe my favorite on the album, but yeah, overall, I think it's a good album. So, Relix 4 by Overkill. Check it out if you like thrash metal or any type of heavy metal. Now, I know thrash metal does have its haters, for being too samey, and I even heard arguments about, thrash metal being a boomer genre or whatever, but I mean, let's be honest here, most of the music that I listen to is what most people would call boomer music. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and move on to the next album. So this next album here is by the band Judas Priest, obviously legends in heavy metal, and this is their comeback album with Rob Halford, of course, and the album from Judas Priest that released in 2005 is their album Angel of Retribution. In this album here, it's obviously not one of their best. I mean, Judas Priest's best material does not come from the 2000s or 2010s, the modern era of the band. That's pretty much a given. I mean, obviously, their most iconic era is from the 70s, 80s, and even 90s. But that doesn't mean that Judas Priest has released bad albums afterwards, because I do think that the modern era of Judas Priest is very, very strong, for sure. I think most of their albums are very good. But Angel of Retribution, of course, I do think it's a very good comeback album as well for the band, and I mean, the guitars on this sound really good. I mean, Rob Halford, he's really given it his all again. I mean, he just came back with this band with something very, very strong. I mean, of course, Judas Rising, the opening track, I mean, just right away, it's like, he's back. Judas Priest is back, is basically what I take from it, what I take from that song in particular. But yeah, just great stuff. So, Angel of Retribution by Judas Priest. So the last album that I want to talk about for this video is by the band Dream Theater. Definitely an essential band for progressive metal, and I do think that they are, in my opinion, the best progressive metal band. And of course, the album that Dream Theater released in 2005 is their album Octavarium. which I know some people say is one of their best. Is that something that I can agree with? I'm not sure, but all I know is that this album did grow on me over time because it actually used to be one of my least favorites. I mean, there's some very strong tracks from this album, of course. The production and everything is really good. I mean, there's a lot of emotion-driven tracks on this album. I mean, the album is a little, I guess more accessible. There's a few tracks that are not, that proggy, such as I Walk Beside You, which is more of a radio rock driven song, more catchy and mainstream sounding. But I think it's a good song, though, still. But, of course, you got really great songs on here, like The Root of All Evil, The Answer Lies Within, Panic Attack, Sacrifice Sons, which is an underrated song. And, of course, you got the closing track, which is the title track, the longest song on the album. It's an epic. I do think that song is rather overhyped, but still a very good track, though. Just not one that I want to return to all that much. But, yeah, of course, you do still got some complexity to this album, but you also got your more straightforward stuff, once again. Very strong album for sure. So, Octavarium by Dream Theater. So there you have it. That is my list of some of the best metal albums of the year 2005. So let me know what you guys think. What are your favorite albums of the year 2005? Feel free to let me know. And what do you think of this list? So with that being said, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day and take care.